The Paramount Theater entertained the people of central Minnesota for over 4 decades, but by the mid 1960s, the theater fell into disrepair. In the 1980s, the building was in danger of being torn down. It was then up to a small group of citizens to save St. Cloud's Paramount Theater.
I quickly learnt that timing is a critical issue, even on good ideas. Downtown St. Cloud was much more vibrant at that time. You know what was happening downtown, and was one of the spots that people regularly went. It carried good movies, and it was probably, in spite of its age, it was probably one of the more comfortable places to go. Nice big screen and appropriate seating. There were two other theaters at the time, and clearly, as far as downtown theaters are concerned, this was the nicest one. They built the theater out at Crossroads Center. Now this would be the early '60s. Called Cinema 70. That sort of took over as the real spot to go. I think I was getting old, and I think that was the beginning of the the evolution of the theater industry, where the multiple screens were becoming more commonplace.
I think it was in the 70s and 80s that it really took a downward spiral.
Well, it showed its age, to say the least. You know, the paint was faded, and you could certainly tell that was not a brand new theater.
It was in pretty bad shape. There were bats everywhere.
Sit there and watch the movie, and all of a sudden you'd see the bats flying in front of the screen, and so kind of added to the ambiance of the whole experience. Yeah, Halloween was packed, hoping to see the bats.
It went through a lot of different phases and ownerships and roles in the community.
It was operated at that time by a company, I believe, out of Fargo or something. It was not a locally owned theater at the time, and I think they were just basically utilizing it as long as it could stand here. The whole thing about theaters, I think, is that there's been an evolution to make a completely different experience out of it, and certainly these older theaters downtown were not conducive to any kind of a transition of that nature. The cost of renovating an old building is a lot more than building a new building. There were a lot of inefficiencies connected to it at that point. A very expensive building to heat. The place where the roof was virtually not insulated.
If it was raining outside, it was raining in here a little bit too.
Now, by this time, when as the theater was shutting down as a movie theater, it was now owned locally by Cinema Entertainment Corporation, which is the one that built and all the theaters in Waite Park and built Cinema 70. They acquired the theater at that time and ran it for a few years before they decided to then shut it down and continue to expand their operation out in Waite Park. 4 or 5 years. Yeah, just shuttered. Yeah, and of course that I think most of us understand that vacant buildings have a tendency to deteriorate more than used buildings do. There's something funny about it.
There was a fire, and then there was smoke damage and water damage, and the theater was really in a state of neglect that was pretty bad. It was pretty terrible.
The fire, along with other structural inadequacies, forced the theater to be closed. The Paramount, which had entertained citizens of central Minnesota for generations, now needed help from the community to survive.
Well, by this time I had completed my banking industry experiences, and so I'm back in town now and seeing what has happened and remembering what we used to experience. It was a nice building with a lot of amenities in it for its style.
There was talk of just tearing the theater down.
And being a business attorney, I kind of had connections to things that were happening, and I found out that they were going to be, or that the building was for sale, and actually was in the process of being sold. They had a buyer, and it was going to either be torn down or gutted and made into an office building.
Plans to rehabilitate the theater were carried forward by the Paramount preservationists led by Robert Calenda. Calenda and others were instrumental in keeping the doors open for live theater over the next several years.
And I started inquiring as to just what was going on and what opportunities might exist, and we were able to come to terms, so I bought the theater. And then I formed an organization, a nonprofit organization called the Paramount Preservationists.
8 to 10 really dedicated community members led the charge, raised $6.1 million, both from local community organizations, businesses stepped forward and saved it. It was a long process. It took several years, but they did it right. They did everything was restored. It was really a beautiful, beautiful job that they did.
And that was the beginning of the thought and the work and the effort towards keeping it a theater, number one, and renovating it into something more appropriate than its current condition was, number two.
After years of struggle to keep the theater afloat, the Paramount Preservationists scored a major victory in 1994 when the St. Cloud Housing and Redevelopment Authority purchased the theater as a means to safeguard the building from demolition and to lay the foundation for future renovation. In November of 1996, the St. Cloud City Council passed a resolution authorizing $6 million in funding to renovate the Paramount Theater. At long last, the Paramount reopened its doors to the public on September 25, 1998, and has thrived ever since.
Now we've been open for 15 years, operating as the Paramount Theater and Visual Arts Center as a nonprofit community arts center. We're at a good point in our history, and I think the community is at a place where it's ready to appreciate it. We've had some of the most amazing performances on our stage. There's almost no dark days. We only are dark when we need to be for cleaning and maintenance and things like that. The community's really utilizing the building to its fullest at this point. Our community was always kind of known as being devoid of culture and not very much going on. And so for me, it really does, it feels good to be able to give back to the community and to provide opportunities for youth and adults to, explore the arts and participate in the arts, in the art making, but then also as an audience member as well. This building is the oldest building in St. Cloud of continuous operation doing the same business. We've always been a theater. We have so much history and memory in this building within the community members that live here. I think that's really special.